Christmas Eve. I hid in the snow-covered shed, listening to my stepmother's heels slice past like a blade on ice. Dad knocked exactly once, then walked away. He left me with a secret that, if opened, would make the whole Whitford family explode like fireworks. The next morning, I walked out, smiling as if nothing had happened, because my plan had been ready for a very long time. My name is Nora Whitford. At 29 years old, I am a supply chain manager for Ravenline Systems, a job that revolves around precision, logistics, and anticipating failure points. I am good at my job. I am good at seeing the flaws in a system. And on December 24th, I was driving my sensible sedan back into the frozen picture postcard town of Winterford Ridge, a place I had escaped years ago. The system I was returning to was my family. The anticipated failure point was me. I was heading home for the perfect family dinner, an annual event orchestrated by my stepmother, Marla. The invitation had been a text, not a request, laced with the unspoken threat of what would happen if I refused. The snow was falling in thick, heavy curtains, muffling the world, but it couldn't muffle the knot of dread in my stomach. Whitford Pines, the grand, drafty house I grew up in, was waiting. It was a house that had perfected the art of looking warm from the outside. The drive was long, giving me too much time to think. My mind kept replaying the events of the last 8 months. 8 months ago, I had sent out the invitations for my own wedding. Simple, elegant, cream-colored cardstock. I had planned a small, quiet ceremony for late December, a time I had always found magical. Despite my family, I had sent them via registered mail. On the exact same day, my invitations arrived. My stepsister, Sable, announced her own engagement. It was a whirlwind. Spontaneous decision, and by some miracle of romantic destiny, she had chosen the exact same wedding day as mine. A soulmate collision, she had called it, fluttering her eyelashes at my father. Gareth, the family group chat, a digital coliseum I usually kept muted, had exploded with celebration. Marla had immediately begun planning the wedding of the season. My own quiet ceremony was instantly, silently erased. It was not a discussion. It was an assumption. When I gently pointed out the conflict, Marla had sent me a private message. I could still see the blue bubble on my phone screen, the words etched onto my brain. Family priority is Sable's wedding. We need to present a united front. You understand? It was a statement, not a question. A cold, clean judgment delivered with the efficiency of a guillotine. It was colder than the ice forming on my windshield. The family priority, and I, apparently, was not the priority. I was not even family. I was just the obstacle. I had typed back a single response. Okay. Marla would have read that okay as acceptance, as submission. She always did. She mistook my silence for weakness. She had no idea that my okay was a click. The sound of a latch engaging. On my laptop, safely encrypted on a secure server, was a file named Project Lantern. It was a supply chain diagram, but not for Ravenline Systems. It was a meticulous plan, complete with flowcharts, risk assessments, and contingency plans. A plan for a different kind of delivery. A delivery of the truth. My phone buzzed in the cup holder, a notification from the family chat. Sable was posting photos of her final dress fitting. My father had replied with a string of heart emojis. I ignored it and turned up the podcast I was listening to. The snow-dusted trees of Winterford Ridge blurred past, and memories rose to meet me, unbidden and unwelcome. I thought of the empty chairs. That was my name for the phenomenon. I was the family photographer. It started when I was young, when I was the only one who knew how to work my grandmother Eloise's old camera. "Nora, get a picture of us," Marla would command, striking a pose with Sable and my father. So I did. I captured every birthday, every Christmas morning, every graduation. I have albums full of them, Marla, Gareth, and Sable, smiling brightly, perfectly framed. I am not in a single one. My presence is marked only by my absence, a ghost documented by the moments she failed to appear. Sometimes, if the light was just right, you could see my shadow stretched across the lawn, my arm raised, holding the camera that made me invisible. I was the official recorder of a family I was never quite allowed to be in. When I complained once, my father had put his hand on my shoulder, his voice full of that tired, practiced patience that was his shield. "You're stronger. You can handle it," he'd said, the old Vietnamese phrase my mother used to use, twisted into something else. "You are stronger. You can handle it." It was the mantra of my childhood. It was the excuse he used every time he chose Sable's manufactured fragility over my quiet endurance. It was the anesthetic he applied to his own conscience. Sable needed the spotlight. I could handle the dark. Sable needed the praise. I could handle the silence. Sable needed the last piece of cake, the bigger bedroom, the new car. I, being stronger, could handle the scraps. I turned onto the long, winding drive of Whitford Pines. The house loomed, lights blazing in every window, a perfect picture of holiday cheer. But my focus was on something else. To the left, barely visible through the swirling snow, was the dark shape of the old garden shed. No one had been in that shed for a decade. It was a relic from before Marla, a place where my grandmother Eloise used to keep her potting soil and wind chimes. It was considered rotten, forgotten, worthless, which is why I bought it. 6 months ago, through a shell corporation I'd set up using my legal knowledge from Ravenline contracts, I purchased the small parcel of land the shed sat on. It was a forgotten clause in the original property deed, an oversight from when the estate was divided. I paid cash. The anonymous entity, Ridge Preservation Holdings, now owned that derelict structure. It was not derelict inside. I had spent 2 weekends, under the guise of a hiking trip, renovating it myself. It was my true destination. Inside that rustic, unassuming shell was a fully insulated, solar-powered workstation, high-speed satellite internet, a biometric safe set into the floor, miniature, sound-activated cameras and microphones, wired with painstaking precision. It was my archive, my fortress of solitude, my witness box. My strength, the strength my father always praised, was not in my ability to endure pain. It was in my ability to plan. My wedding list had been the first casualty. As I sat in my apartment, staring at the glowing screen of Project Lantern, I had opened the spreadsheet of my wedding guests. 200 names, family friends, distant relatives, people Marla insisted must be invited. I deleted them. I deleted them all. I started a new list, a new tab. Attendees. I focused not on who should be there, but on who will actually show up. The list was short. My cousin Rowan, who had called me the day of Sable's announcement and said, "That is messed up." My 2 great aunts, my grandmother's sisters, who always sent me cards with $20 bills in them. Long after I was an adult, a few friends from college who had seen me through the worst of my family's casual cruelty. That was it. My wedding had been reduced to a dozen people, but they were the right people. They were the ones who had stood by me. The final piece of the plan was in the safe, in the shed. I had found it tucked into one of my grandmother's old gardening books, a book I had taken after she passed, before Marla could throw it all out. It was a thick legal envelope. Inside was a letter, a formal, binding document from her lawyers. It outlined the existence of a secret trust, the Whitford Olive Lantern Trust. The signature at the bottom was clear and strong. Eloise Whitford, my grandmother. She had seen it all. Even then, she had seen the way the wind was blowing, the way Marla operated, the way my father bent. The trust was established for a specific purpose, its language archaic but clear. It was for the forgotten branch of the family, for the descendant who was overlooked. I parked the car. The front door of Whitford Pines opened, spilling a rectangle of warm, yellow light onto the snow. Marla was standing in the doorway, a vision in cashmere, her smile bright and hard as a diamond. I grabbed my bag. As I stepped out into the biting wind, I thought of that letter. I thought of my grandmother. I thought of the cameras in the shed, quietly recording the snow-filled garden. Marla and my father had made their choice. They had chosen the easy path, the path of least resistance, which was always Sable. They had chosen the bright, loud, easy story over the quiet, complex, difficult one. They had forgotten me. I made a vow, right there in the driveway, the snowflakes melting on my face. If they chose easy one more time tonight, if they pushed me into that familiar, invisible role of the photographer, the strong one, the empty chair, I would show them all. I would show the entire town of Winterford Ridge what convenient truth really meant. I took a deep breath, fixed a neutral smile on my face, and walked toward the light. The show was about to begin. I stepped over the threshold, stamping the snow from my boots onto the antique Persian rug. The air inside Whitford Pines was thick and overly warm, smelling of pine-scented candles and roasting meat, a manufactured comfort that always sat wrong in my lungs. Marla was there, gliding from the hallway to greet me. Her smile was a masterpiece of social engineering. It was beautiful, perfectly white, and utterly impenetrable. It was the smile of tempered glass. You could admire the sheen, but you would break your fist trying to get through it. It was slick, and it was cold. "Nora, darling," she said, her voice a warm caramel drizzle. She opened her arms for an embrace, a performance for an invisible audience. I leaned in, allowing her cashmere-clad arms to brush my shoulders, a brief, sterile contact. "We were so worried the snow would keep you." "I'm good at managing logistics," I said, pulling back. "She's here!" A high-pitched shriek, and then Sable was descending the grand staircase, a whirlwind of red velvet and glitter. She was 24, but she had cultivated the breathless, wide-eyed wonder of a permanent teenager, a role the family eagerly enabled. She launched herself at me, her arms wrapping around my neck in a hug that was both suffocating and territorial. "Nora, you made it! Oh, look!" She pulled her left hand back from my shoulder and thrust it into my face, nearly blinding me. A diamond the size of a small acorn sat on her finger, catching the chandelier light and fracturing it into painful, sharp rainbows. "Isn't it perfect?" Garrett just surprised me with the final setting. "It's large," I said. "It was just the most amazing coincidence," she gushed, her eyes bright and vacant. "We were just so in love. We couldn't wait. And it just so happened our schedules lined up perfectly for a Christmas wedding. Can you believe the luck?" I looked past her, at Marla, who was watching with that same serene, glass-like smile. "Coincidence has a schedule," I replied, my voice quiet. Sable's face faltered for a second, the math too complex for her to process immediately, before she could form a reply. My father, Gareth, emerged from his study, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. "Nora, you're here? Good." He had that weary, pre-defeated look he always wore during holidays. He was a man who craved peace at any price, and usually, I was the price. He came forward and gave me a one-armed hug that smelled of whiskey and avoidance. "Good, good." He saw the tension, the triangle of me, his wife, and his favorite daughter, and he immediately went into his default mode, placation. "All right, let's have a civilized evening," he said, forcing a chuckle that sounded like stones grinding together. "It's Christmas Eve. Don't make a scene on the holiday, Nora." The accusation was so immediate, so reflexive. I was the one who existed. Therefore, I was the one making the scene. "I'm not making a scene, Dad," I said, meeting his eyes. His gaze slid away, as it always did, landing somewhere over my shoulder. "I'm just recording." His brow furrowed. "Recording what?" "The moment," I said simply, turning to hand my coat to the housekeeper who had appeared silently at my elbow. "It's good to be home." Marla clapped her hands, a sharp, brittle sound that cut through the tension she pretended not to feel. "Wonderful. Now, everyone into the drawing room. We have so much to celebrate." She was attempting to stage manage a reunion, The room was suffocatingly hot from a roaring fireplace, the mantel draped in so much garland it looked like it was being strangled. We sat, me on a stiff-backed chair, Sable and Gareth on the plush sofa, and Marla on her hostess armchair, her spine ramrod straight. "Nora, dear," she began, leaning forward, her smile dialed down from greeting to serious but caring. "I am so glad you're here. We need to discuss logistics. This whole wedding business." "My wedding," I clarified. "Our weddings," Sable chirped from the sofa, snuggling into Dad's side. He patted her head. "Yes, well," Marla continued, ignoring Sable. "Sable's day it's just become quite the event. The town, the press, and with the family priority being what it is, I was thinking it would be so much more practical, for everyone, if you simply moved your little gathering, perhaps to the spring. March is lovely here." There it was, the request, which was, as always, a command. She was asking me to dismantle my life, my plans, my commitments, for logistics, for her convenience. "I don't think that's possible," I said. "Nora, be reasonable," my father said, his stronger speech visibly loading on his tongue. "I am." I reached into my purse. I pulled out a single, small, heavy stock card. It was minimalist, just our names and a date. No frills, no gold foil. I placed it on the coffee table in front of Marla. "My invitations are out. The arrangements are non-refundable." Marla picked up the card, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against it. Her upper lip curled just slightly. "There's no address, just this code." She was looking at the small, square QR code printed at the bottom. "It's a secure location," I said. "The address is revealed to confirmed guests 24 hours before the ceremony." Sable giggled. "That's so weird. Nora, like you're a spy." Marla, however, was not amused. Control was her currency, and this was information she did not have. I watched as she pulled out her phone, her thumb moving with sharp, angry little taps. She opened her camera, scanned the code. Her face tightened. I knew what she was seeing. A blank white page. Nothing. The link was not active. It would not be active until I made it so. "It seems to be broken," she said, her voice dropping a full degree. "It works perfectly," I said. "You just need to be on the list." Before she could respond, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I excused myself. "I need to use the restroom." I walked out of the drawing room, not toward the powder room, but down the main hallway. The walls were a gallery of Whitford family history. As curated by Marla, I had walked this hall 1,000 times, but I was looking at it with fresh eyes, with the cold precision of an auditor. There was the photo from Sable's high school graduation. There was the photo from the family vacation to the lake, the one where I'd fallen off the dock and my father had laughed. There was the photo from Christmas, 10 years ago. I stopped. I moved closer to the wall. The frame was ornate, gold leaf. The photo inside was of my father, Marla, and Sable, huddled together in front of the tree. But something was wrong. The composition was off balance, skewed to the left. On the far right, just at the edge of the matting, was a sliver of a red sweater. My sweater. I moved to the next photo, the lake, Dad and Sable in the boat, Marla on the dock, waving, and at the far edge, a single, disembodied shoulder, my shoulder. I went down the line, one by one. It was not a single, accidental cropping. It was a systematic, meticulous erasure. In picture after picture, I had been literally cut out. My face was gone. My presence was reduced to a stray elbow, a sliver of my arm, the edge of my hair. I was the ghost in the machine, the girl who was only there to hold the camera. And when I had somehow managed to get in the shot, I had been surgically removed. They hadn't even bothered to buy new, smaller frames. They just trimmed the evidence of me away. I felt a cold, sharp clarity, like a winter morning. It was not hatred. It was confirmation. My phone buzzed again. I pulled it out. A private message from my cousin Rowan. "Hey, just landed. Heard you were heading into the lion's den. If it comes down to it, I'm on your team. Always. I typed back a single word. Lantern? He'd understand. I tagged his name in my mental file, moving him into the confirmed column of Project Lantern. I put the phone away and turned back toward the drawing room. The sound of Marla's laughter, high and brittle, floated down the hall. When I re-entered, she was in the middle of a story, holding court. And of course, the string quartet had to be the one from the city. Sable deserves nothing less. The family fund has been a godsend. I tell you, we couldn't have pulled off this level of elegance without it. I stopped. The family fund. My father, who had been nursing his drink, flinched. It was a tiny movement, a flicker of his eyelids, a tightening of his grip on the glass. But I saw it. He stared intently into the fireplace, suddenly fascinated by the flames. He would not look at me. "The family fund?" I asked. My voice cut through the warm air, and the room went silent. Marla, caught in her own monologue, turned to me. Her smile was still in place, but it was strained, the glass threatening to crack. "Yes, dear, a small trust set up for family events, weddings, graduations, that sort of thing." "Where did the money come from?" I asked. I kept my voice level, curious, as if I were asking for a recipe. Marla's smile vanished. It didn't fade. It was just gone, replaced by a cold, hard stare. This was the real Marla. "That's grown-up business, Nora," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "You wouldn't understand the complexities." I held her gaze. I didn't look at my father, who I could feel practically vibrating with the desire to be anywhere else. I looked right at her. "Then I'm a grown-up today." No one spoke. The only sound was the crackle of the fire and the rising howl of the wind outside. Marla's face was white. Her nostrils flared. Sable looked confused, her gaze flickering between me and her mother. Sensing the script had been abandoned, my father was a statue, frozen in his act of avoidance. The silence stretched, thick and heavy as the snow that was now falling in a furious white curtain, as if the sky itself was trying to bury the secret. But it was too late. I already had the shovel. I broke the silence. "It is getting a little warm in here. I think I'll get a breath of fresh air. Check the car." "Don't be long," Marla said, her voice still tight. "Dinner is almost ready." "I won't." I grabbed my coat, walked out the front door, and stepped back into the storm. The wind was sharp, stinging my cheeks, but it felt clean. It cut through the perfumed, oppressive heat of the house. I didn't go to my car. I pulled my hood up and walked the perimeter of the lawn, my boots sinking into the deep snow, until I was in the shadow of the house. Then I made my way to the back garden, toward the dark, unassuming shape of the shed. From my pocket, I pulled a small, coded fob. A discreet sensor on the shed's jamb flashed a tiny green light, and the reinforced deadbolt slid back with a barely audible pneumatic shush. I slipped inside, locking it behind me. The difference was immediate. Outside, a blizzard. Inside, silence. The space was insulated, climate-controlled, and lit by the cool blue-white glow of a bank of monitors. My real base, my archive. I sat in the single ergonomic chair and typed a password into the keyboard. "Activate Lantern 1, I said, my voice quiet. A small red light on a soundboard blinked to life. "System active," a neutral digital voice replied. The microphones I had placed in the shed, wired to be hypersensitive to the exterior, began feeding audio to the hard drive. Every word spoken within 50 feet of the shed would now be recorded, time-stamped, and saved. The tiny, snow-proof cameras I'd mounted in the eaves of the shed roof, camouflaged as birdhouses, were already recording. Their feeds displayed on 2 of the monitors. I could see the main house, a great, glowing box of lies. I could see the driveway. I could see the path. I turned to the safe in the floor, hidden beneath a false panel. I placed my thumb on the biometric scanner. It clicked open. I did not feel triumphant. I felt cold. This was not a passion project. It was a forensic audit of my own life. I pulled out the first file, the one that started it all, the legal envelope from my grandmother. Eloise. It was a draft. Yes, but it was a notarized draft, a statement of intent so powerful her lawyers had kept it on file. It outlined the creation of the Olive Lantern Trust. I read the mission statement, words I now knew by heart. To be held for the benefit of the Whitford grandchild who has been most overlooked, whose contributions have been most ignored, and whose path has been most obscured by the more convenient narratives of others. It was a poem and a legal document all at once. It was my grandmother's voice, her sharp, clear-eyed assessment of her own son and the woman he'd married. It stipulated that the beneficiary was to be determined not by affection, but by objective criteria. Systematic exclusion from family records, disparity in educational and lifestyle funding, documented instances of being relegated to a secondary status. It was a checklist of my entire childhood. Next, I pulled out the binders, the bank statements. For years, I had watched Marla and my father. I had noted the name of their family accountant, Mr. Keene. I had seen the logo on their letterhead. Marla and Associates, a shell, and I had used my supply chain skills to trace the flow of money. The Olive Lantern Trust was managed by a third-party firm, but Marla had been installed as a non-voting consultant. From there, she had created a shell company, Pinecrest Socials, a community outreach and event planning firm. It was laughable, but in Winterford Ridge, no one looked too closely at the Whitfords. The ledgers told the story in cold, hard numbers. Money moved from the trust to Pinecrest Socials for community development. From Pinecrest Socials, the money flowed out, a payment for venue booking that matched, to the dollar. The deposit on Sable's 18th birthday party at the local country club, a consulting fee that matched the lease on Sable's first convertible, a massive scholarship grant that was paid out in the same month Sable decided to take a gap year to find herself in Europe. It was not just theft, it was a redirection. It was taking the water meant for a forgotten plant and using it to flood a rose garden. I picked up the small, black USB drive. This was the visual aid. I plugged it into the console. A folder popped up. Pinecrest Community Fund. I clicked Video Files. The first one opened. It was labeled Scholarship Gala 2018. The video was shaky, clearly from a cell phone, but the audio was clear. It was Sable, on a yacht in the Mediterranean, laughing as she popped a bottle of champagne. The file date. The same week my application for a study abroad scholarship had been denied because my father couldn't co-sign. The next file. Community Outreach Luncheon. It was Sable, at a high-end ski resort, holding up a designer handbag. "Dad, isn't it divine? It's an investment," she was saying. I closed the file. My hands were steady. This was just data. I opened my timeline, a spreadsheet I had been building for 6 months. The 2 columns were Nora and Sable. Nora. Achieves valedictorian. Event. Fund. Under annual review. All disbursements temporarily frozen. Sable. Fails 2 classes. Event. Fund pays for specialized tutoring at a private, out-of-state academy. Nora. Accepted to First Choice University. Event. Fund. Reallocating assets. Scholarship application denied. Sable. Announces desire to be a lifestyle influencer. Event. Fund invests in new media startup, Pinecrest Socials, which then buys Sable a full suite of cameras, lighting, and a new laptop. It went on for years. Every time I achieved something, the money vanished. Every time Sable stumbled, a cushion of my grandmother's money was there to catch her. Tucked in the back of the safe was one last piece of paper, a printout. It was an email I had recovered from my grandmother's old, archived account, a long-shot password guess that had, miraculously, worked. It was an email from her to her lawyer, dated a month before she died. "They are already pushing her to the margins," Eloise had written. "They are trimming her from the photos, but they underestimate her. The child who is pushed aside learns to watch from the shadows. The child who is forgotten learns to remember everything. She will know how to find her way back. She knew. She had seen it all. The final document was the most important. It was the full binding copy of the trust management contract. I had paid a paralegal $300 to pull it from the county records. I had read every line, but I only cared about one. Section 7, subpoint 3. In the event the primary beneficiary, as determined by the criteria in Addendum A, feels the trust is being mismanaged, said beneficiary has the right to demand an immediate, full, and external audit at any time, superseding any and all consultant overrides. The true beneficiary, the one determined by the criteria, the forgotten one, me. I took a deep breath. It was time. From the safe, I took 3 identical, encrypted, solid-state hard drives. Drive 1. I placed it back in the safe. My master copy, Drive 2, already in a secure mailbox, on its way to my cousin Rowan, my Lantern Group point person. Drive 3, already in a bank's safe deposit box in another state, co-signed to my great-aunt, the executor of my personal will. Redundancy, the first rule of supply chain management. Finally, I opened my laptop and reviewed the draft email. It was addressed to the Ridge Chronicle, the local paper, the subject, anonymous tip, embezzlement at the Whitford Family Trust. Attached was a zip file, a curated selection of the evidence, the bank statements, the scholarship gala video, the timeline. I activated the sending protocol. It was a dead man's switch, a little piece of code I'd written myself. It was now linked to the GPS and biometric signal from my phone. If my phone was destroyed, went offline, or I failed to input my security code for more than 6 hours, the email would send. I was giving them a chance to tell the truth, but I was not giving them a chance to win. I closed the programs, powered down the monitors. The high-tech sanctuary went dark, becoming a simple shed once more. I locked the safe, sealed the door, and stepped back out into the blizzard. The snow was heavier now, the world reduced to a swirling, white chaos. I walked back to the house, the wind at my back, pushing me forward. I stamped the snow off my boots, hung up my coat, and walked back into the drawing room. My father was poking the fire. Sable was on her phone. Marla was looking at the dining room, mentally checking her placemats. "Is the car okay?" my father asked, not looking at me. "Everything's fine," I said, my voice perfectly calm. "I just got a little turned around in the snow." I sat down on the same stiff-back chair. I was exactly the same person who had left the room 10 minutes ago. I was Nora, the quiet one, the strong one, the one who could handle it. I sat there, in the warm, oppressive silence, and I waited. "Dinner is served," Marla announced, her voice ringing with the false cheer of a cruise ship director. We moved into the dining room. It was Marla's masterpiece. The table was a football field of polished mahogany. Set for 2020, an army of crystal glasses stood at attention, a forest of silverware. The centerpiece was a sprawling, aggressive arrangement of holly, pine, and white roses that must have cost a small fortune. Each of the 20 place settings had a handwritten calligraphed name, and at least half of them were for people who were not there. The chairs of the distant relatives, the ones Marla counted on for her audience, were starkly, accusationally empty. The scent of the food was overwhelming, a heavy, rich smell of roasted garlic, thyme, and the sweet, cloying aroma of honey-glazed ham. It was a meal designed to be photographed, a feast of sensory overload. We sat, me, Marla, Gareth, and Sable, the 4 of us, rattling around this enormous, empty table, the vacant chairs standing witness. "Well," Gareth said, unfolding his napkin with a loud snap, "this is nice." My phone vibrated in my lap, a silent, secret tremor. I slid my hand under the table, my thumb finding the screen. A new text, not from Rowan, from my great-aunt Elspeth. "Flight 782. See you tomorrow. Dear, we've booked 3 tickets." Three. 3 more people had chosen. I felt a small, steady click, another piece of the machine locking into place. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. Marla raised her wine glass, the crystal catching the candlelight. Her diamonds flashed. "A toast," she said, beaming at the empty chairs, at the family she wished she had. "To the star of our family, to my beautiful daughter, Sable, to her future, her happiness, and the wonderful, wonderful man she has chosen. May your life be as bright and beautiful as you are." The star of the family, the same words. They had been used so often, for so long. They were no longer a compliment. They were a dull knife, used not to cut, but to bludgeon, to repeatedly press against the same spot until the skin was raw. It was the title that excused all of Sable's failings and erased all of my achievements. Sable giggled and raised her own glass. "To me!" Gareth, my father, cleared his throat, his own glass held halfway. "And I'd like to add to that, a toast to family, because that's what this is all about. Family." He looked at me, his eyes pleading, begging me to play the game, to be the stronger one. It's not always easy. Family is about sacrifice. It's about knowing when to step back so others can shine. It's about pulling together for the good of the unit. Sacrifice. I swirled the water in my glass. The word hung in the air, heavy as the smell of the ham. Family is sacrifice. It was always his favorite theme. He had never, not once, clarified the terms. It was a question of who was sacrificing, and for whom. And in this house, the answer was always the same. I was the sacrifice. I was the offering laid at the altar of Sable's convenience and Marla's ambition. The food was served. The housekeeper, moving with silent resentment, placed a plate in front of me. Seared scallops. They were cooked perfectly, but my stomach turned. I thought of the ledgers. Was this scallop community outreach? Was the wine a scholarship grant? "And now, a little surprise," Marla announced, setting her fork down with a clink. "I had this commissioned, a little walk down memory lane for our bride-to-be." A projector screen I hadn't noticed descended from a hidden recess in the ceiling. The lights dimmed. My father fumbled with a remote, and a video began to play. It was Sable, a fast-cut montage of her entire life, set to a soaring, saccharine piano track. Sable on her first bicycle, my father running beside her, holding her up. Sable at her first piano recital, bowing awkwardly. Sable at her prom, a vision in sequined blue. Sable at her high school graduation, tossing her cap. I watched, my face neutral. I ate a scallop. It tasted like nothing, like cold, wet cotton. And then I saw it, a clip of a birthday party. Sable, in a pink dress, blowing out the candles on a massive cake. In the background, there was a window, and in the window's dark reflection, a thin, 10-year-old girl with dark hair, holding up the camera. Me. Another clip, Christmas morning, Sable, buried in a mountain of presents. In the metallic reflection of a silver ornament on the tree, a tiny, distorted image of me, sitting on the floor, watching. I was there, just as I had been in the hallway, a reflection, a shadow, a disembodied presence required to document the moments I was not allowed to participate in. The video was a 2-minute summary of my erasure. The video ended. The lights came up. Sable was dabbing at her eyes, a performance of emotion. "Oh, Mommy, that was beautiful." "Only the best for you, darling," Marla said, her voice thick with self-satisfaction. "And I am so proud to announce, as a Christmas gift to you both, that the family is taking care of everything. The entire wedding, the venue, the dress, the 10-piece band, the full package, a proper Whitford wedding, fully funded." She smiled, a wide, predatory smile, a clear signal to the press she had no doubt already contacted. I looked down at my plate. The laughter was rising in the room, a hollow, brittle sound. My father, relieved, Sable, ecstatic, Marla, triumphant. I reached down and tapped the face of my watch. Twice, A small, haptic buzz confirmed the command. Across the garden, in the silent, dark shed, the high-fidelity microphones I had actually hidden in the dining room's floral arrangement and under the sideboard, all networked to the Lantern One system, began to record. Every word, every brittle laugh, every lie. My phone vibrated again. I glanced down. It was Rowan. It was not a text. It was a picture, a selfie. He was in an airport terminal, grinning. Behind him, my great-aunt Elspeth was waving, and my Uncle Martin was giving a thumbs up. The departure board was visible over his shoulder. The caption was 4 words. "We chose Nora. See you tomorrow." I felt something in my chest that was not coldness. It was a small, hot coal of something else. Vindication. I put the phone away. "You're very quiet." "Nora," Marla said, her eyes pinning me. "Not enjoying the celebration?" "Just taking it all in," I said. The housekeeper came to clear the plates. As she did, the distant sound of the front door opening and closing echoed from the hall. A few minutes later, it happened again. "The Rhodes, Marla," one of the few remaining relatives, a second cousin, said, pushing his chair back, "The snow is really coming down. We should probably get ahead of the storm." "Oh," Marla said, her smile faltering. "But dessert, we have a croquembouche?" "Next time, dear. We really must," his wife said. Already gathering her purse, they left the room in a quiet flurry of apologies. They were not the last. Another couple, my father's golf buddy and his wife, mumbled something about an early morning and slick roads, and vanished before the coffee was even poured. The room was suddenly, shockingly empty. The grand table, set for 20, now held just 4 of us. The evidence of the phantom guests remained: the crumpled napkins, the half-empty wine glasses. Sable, who had been on her phone, finally looked up. Her eyes widened, taking in the empty chairs, the abandoned desserts. The bubble of her self-obsession finally popped. Where did everyone go?" she asked, her voice small, confused. "Why are there so many empty chairs?" Marla, who had been staring at the croquembouche as if it had personally betrayed her, turned her head. Her smile was still fixed in place, a rictus of social grace. She reached across the table and placed her hand on Sable's, her nails digging into her daughter's skin. I heard the sound of teeth grinding, a faint, sharp click of teeth. "Do not," Marla hissed, her voice a venomous whisper that was a perfect contrast to her smiling face. "Do not make a scene." Marla's smile was a terrifying thing. It was cemented in place, a grotesque mask of holiday cheer. But her eyes were like 2 chips of ice. She stood up, her movements sharp and bird-like. "Nora, dear," she said, her voice dangerously bright, "would you come help me with the coffee? I have a feeling the machine is acting up again." It was a command, not a request. This was not about coffee. "Of course," I said. I followed her out of the grand dining room, past the wreckage of the abandoned feast, and into the secondary kitchen, the butler's pantry. It was a cold, sterile room of stainless steel and white tile, smelling faintly of bleach. It was where the real, messy work of the house was done, hidden from guests. How appropriate. She pushed the door, and it swung shut with a heavy, final thud, plunging the room into a sudden, pressurized silence. The roar of the dining room fire was gone. Marla turned. The smile was gone. Her face was a flat, white mask of rage. "What did you do?" she hissed, her voice low and vibrating. "What did you say to them? You are ruining this. You are actively, deliberately, ruining my daughter's celebration." "I didn't say anything," I said, my voice echoing slightly off the cold tile. "Lies. You walk in here, with that face on, that quiet, judgmental, superior look. You can't bear to see your sister happy. You have always been jealous. You are ruining this family. You are ruining this house." I let the accusation hang in the sterile air. I had heard this speech before, in various forms. my entire life. Anytime I had a need, a win, a simple request, I was being difficult or ruining something. "I'm not ruining anything," I said. I reached into the inner pocket of my blazer, a pocket I had tailored specifically for this. I pulled out a standard 9 by 12 manila envelope. "I'm just here for a family dinner." I placed the envelope on the stainless steel counter between us. It landed with a soft, heavy sound. Marla stared at it, her eyes narrowing in suspicion. "What is that? More of your invitations?" "Evidence," I said. She snatched the envelope. Her hands were shaking. She ripped open the clasp and pulled out the contents. It was not the whole file. It was a curated, introductory package, a highlights reel, the cover sheet from the Olive Lantern Trust, a one-page summary of the mission statement, with the key phrases: overlooked, ignored, secondary status, highlighted in yellow, and a single, beautifully simple bank statement showing $10,000 moving from the trust to Pinecrest Socials, and on the same day, a $10,000 payment from Pinecrest Socials to Sable Whitford, European Gap Year Fund. Marla's face went from white to a blotchy, mottled red. "This is ridiculous," she scoffed, but her voice was an octave too high. This is nonsense. You don't understand the law. You don't understand how these things work. This is private." "It is," I agreed. "It's a private trust. I have the full charter. I was particularly interested in Section 7, Subpoint 3. The specificity of the number hit her. I saw her falter. This was not a vague, emotional accusation. This was a line item. "It details the rights of the true beneficiary," I continued, my voice calm, as if I were discussing a shipping manifest. "The one who fits the criteria. The right to an immediate and full audit. The beneficiary who was, as my grandmother so perfectly phrased it, excluded from the benefits." "You? You think that's you?" Marla laughed, a sound like glass breaking. "You are delusional." "Am I?" The door swung open, and my father stood there, a look of profound, weary misery on his face. He was holding his empty whiskey glass. "Marla, Nora, what's going on? People left. What's wrong?" "Your daughter is accusing me of theft," Marla shrieked, her composure shattering. She thrust the papers at him. She's insane." Gareth stepped into the room, his gaze falling on the papers in his wife's hand. He looked at the bank statement. He looked at the name, Olive Lantern Trust, and then he looked away. He looked at the floor. He looked at the ceiling. He looked at the coffee pot. He would not, could not, look at me. "Gareth," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through his studied avoidance. "Did you know about this?" "Nora," he began, his voice a low, pained sigh. He ran a hand through his thinning hair. Let's not do this. It's Christmas Eve. Whatever this is, it can wait. We are a family." "I want to know," I said, "who gave Marla permission to use the fund meant for the forgotten grandchild to build a stage for Sable?" The question hung in the air. My father had no answer. He just looked old, defeated. He had made his choice, to walk away, to choose the easy path, so many years ago that he no longer knew how to do anything else. Marla, seeing her husband, her supposed defender, crumbling, turned her attack. She dropped the legal pretense and went for the kill. She stepped toward me, her face inches from mine. Her perfume was a sweet, suffocating cloud. "You know what your problem is?" she whispered, her voice a blade. "You are cold. You have always been a cold, unfeeling child. You don't know how to be happy. You don't know how to love. It's no wonder no one can ever really love you." Who could ever love that? It was her final weapon, the one she had used on me since I was a child, the one that had, for a long time, worked. The idea that I was inherently unlovable, and that all my family's actions were just a natural reaction to this fundamental flaw in my character. I did not flinch. I did not raise my voice. I looked past her, at my father. who was now leaning against the counter, his eyes closed, as if he could make us disappear. I looked back at Marla. "Love isn't a prize for a pleasant smile," I said. "It's not a reward for being easy. I'm not cold. I'm just finished." "Gareth, do something!" Marla screamed. "Nora, please," my father said, his eyes still closed. Don't make this any louder. It's Christmas Eve." "I'm not being loud. Dad," I said. "I'm being quiet. The evidence, on the other hand, is very, very loud. But don't worry, it's safe." The door to the dining room was slightly ajar, and in the crack, I saw a sliver of red velvet. Sable, she was standing outside, in the shadows of the hallway, listening, and for the first time, I saw an expression on her face that was not manufactured glee or petulant boredom. It was fear. Real, cold, dawning fear. She was hearing the numbers. The numbers didn't lie. The numbers didn't care if she was the star of the family. "This is garbage!" Marla shrieked, and in a fit of rage, she grabbed the envelope and the papers, crushed them in her fist, and threw them at me. They hit my chest and fluttered to the sterile tile floor. "You have nothing," she spat. I didn't bend to pick them up. I didn't need to. I just looked at her. "Marla, that's a copy." I tapped the phone in my pocket. "Everything is on the cloud." Her face, for the first time in the 20 years I had known her, was completely, totally blank. The tempered glass had finally shattered. I walked out of the butler's pantry, leaving the crushed paper on the floor. I did not look at Marla's blank, shattered face. I did not look at my father, who was still leaning against the counter, his eyes shut tight, a man refusing to see his own life. I walked past Sable. She was still in the doorway, a statue of red velvet, her hand over her mouth. Her eyes, wide and terrified, followed me. The fear was a new look for her. It was interesting. I walked back into the cavernous dining room. The silence was profound. The croquembouche, a monument to Marla's ambition, was starting to wilt under the warm lights. The candles, which had been so bright and festive hours ago, were now burning low, the wicks drowning in pools of wax. The smell of cooling, congealing fat from the ham hung in the air. I sat down at my assigned seat. I picked up my fork. I took a bite of a cold scallop. Sable stumbled in after me, her movements clumsy, her star quality extinguished. She didn't return to her seat. She sank into the one closest to the door, a chair that had belonged to a great-uncle who hadn't spoken to my father in 5 years. She sat there, hunched, her glittering, festive dress suddenly looking like a costume, a garish joke. The spotlight Marla had spent a lifetime building had just been snapped off, leaving her in a cold, blue, chemical light. She looked down at her enormous engagement ring, the one that had been purchased with my inheritance, and for the first time, it seemed to weigh her hand down. My father appeared a moment later. He did not look at me. He did not look at his wife. He did not look at his favorite daughter. He walked, his shoulders stooped, straight past the dining room and into his study. He shut the door. The click of the lock was faint, but I heard it. Marla was the last to emerge. Her recovery was a terrible, fascinating thing to watch. She had, in the 60 seconds it took her to walk from the pantry, reassembled her face. The smile was back. But it was all wrong. It was a rictus. It was the smile of a skull. It was plastered on. But her eyes were still blank. The pupils dilated. She was a doll whose mechanism had broken. She walked to the sideboard, her movements jerky. "More coffee? Anyone?" she asked the empty room. Her voice was a high-pitched, brittle thing, a sound that was trying to be normal and failing spectacularly. Sable didn't respond. She was staring at her phone, her thumb scrolling, her face pale. I imagined she was looking at her wedding registry, her vendor contracts, her entire fully funded future, and seeing it all dissolve. A muffled sound came from the study. My father's voice. He was on the phone. His voice was low, urgent, panicked. I couldn't hear every word, but the important ones carried. Breach of trust. Fiduciary duty. My wife was the consultant. Misappropriation. He was talking to a lawyer, not to me, not to his wife. He was calling for legal advice. His ship was sinking, and he was grabbing the only life raft he could find, leaving his family to drown. Marla's hand, holding the silver coffee pot, was shaking so violently that the pot rattled against the china cup she was pretending to fill. She set it down with a clack. She grabbed a linen napkin from the table, one of the 20 pristine, untouched napkins, and began to twist it. Her fingernails, those perfect, blood-red talons, dug into the fabric, her knuckles white. She was smiling at the centerpiece, smiling at the wall, smiling at the ghost of her perfect party. I watched her. I watched her shred the napkin, her breathing shallow. I watched Sable's face drain of all color. I listened to my father's panicked, whispered legal consultation from the next room. I was not triumphant. I was not angry. I was an auditor. I was collecting the looks, the sounds, the tiny fragments of a family coming apart at the seams. I was just, as I had told my father, recording. There was no need for glee. The facts were doing all the work. My phone, in my lap, buzzed. It was not a text. It was an email. The sender was a generic, automated address from the Ridge Chronicle. The subject: Anonymous tip submission. Whitford Trust. The body was short. To whom it may concern. We have received your anonymous submission regarding the Olive Lantern Trust. We take allegations of this nature seriously. We have contacted the trust administrator, Mr. Keene, for comment. As a matter of policy, we are holding publication for 24 hours to allow for a formal response. Thank you. The clock was now ticking. The dead man's switch was no longer a threat. It was a promise. I had given them 6 hours of buffer, and now the system was active. The external auditor was coming. At that moment, the last two guests, my great-aunts Elspeth and Maeve, emerged from the powder room, their coats on. They were my grandmother's sisters, sharp, practical women who had always seen Marla for what she was. "Marla, dear," Elspeth said, her voice clear and caring in the silent room. "We must be going." Marla turned, her shredded napkin-filled fist still at her side, her smile stretching wider. "Oh, no, you mustn't. The snow, it's terrible out there. You must stay. I'll have Gareth make up the guest rooms." "That's very kind," Maeve said, pulling her gloves on. "But we have to catch the bus, the 11:30 express." The bus, the nearest bus station, was 50 miles away. These women had not taken a bus in 40 years. It was the most absurd, flimsy, wonderful excuse I had ever heard. It was a public, deliberate choice. Marla's face faltered. The bus?" "Yes, we're on a schedule," Elspeth said, and she looked directly at me. She smiled, a real, warm smile. "Nora, so lovely to see you. We'll see you tomorrow." They walked themselves to the door. Marla, the perfect hostess, was left frozen by the sideboard, clutching her shredded linen. We heard the front door open and then close. The house was empty. It was just us, the guilty, the witness, and the collateral damage. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was the Lantern group chat. Rowan. It was a picture, a small, rustic, beautiful chapel, made of dark wood. It was lit from within, the light pouring out of the windows, illuminating the snow-covered pine trees that surrounded it. It was a beacon. It was warm. It was real. The caption read, "Arrived. It's beautiful. We're all here, waiting for you." I looked at the picture of the chapel, the place my real family was gathering. Then I looked up, at the ruins of Marla's dining room. The contrast was so sharp, so absolute, it almost made me laugh. I took a final sip of my water. I placed my fork and knife together on my plate. Parallel, a finished meal. I deliberately, slowly, folded my own linen napkin. I placed it on the table. I stood up. The movement was sudden in the silent room. Marla, Sable, and the muffled voice of my father all seemed to stop, their attention focused on me. "I'm going to get some air," I said, my voice clear. "I'm going to the garden." No one said a word. No one tried to stop me. Marla was still a statue of smiling rage. Sable was a ghost in red velvet. My father was on the other side of a locked door, trying to save himself. I walked to the front hall, put on my boots, my coat, my gloves. I opened the heavy front door and stepped out into the night. The wind was sharp, but the snow had lightened. It was falling in gentle, fat flakes. The air was clean and cold. It felt like the first real breath I had taken all day. I walked down the stone path, my boots crunching in the fresh powder. I walked past my car. I walked toward the back garden. Across the lawn, at the edge of the property, was the shed. The single, narrow window, which I had blacked out from the inside, was leaking one solitary, razor-thin sliver of light, the light from my active monitors, my light. I was halfway across the garden when I heard the sound of the front door opening again. I heard the crunch of boots in the snow, heavy, hesitant. I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. I kept walking. I reached the wooden door of the shed, my land. I reached into my pocket for my fob. Behind me, the footsteps stopped. About 10 feet away, I heard his voice, my father's. "Nora." I did not turn. I stood, my back to him, my hand on the doorknob. There was a long, terrible silence, filled only by the sound of the wind. He was waiting for me to turn, waiting for me to make it easy, waiting for me to be the stronger one, to manage his emotions, to fix the mess he had allowed to happen. He took a step closer. I heard the crunch. He stopped, just out of arm's reach. He raised his hand. He knocked. One single, soft, hesitant knock on the wooden door. Knock. He was asking for permission to enter my world. He was asking me to save him. I said nothing. I just stood there, my hand on the fob, waiting. The silence stretched. 1 second, 10, 30. He was waiting for an answer I was not going to give. Then, I heard him sigh. It was not a sigh of anger or frustration. It was a sigh of complete and total defeat. I heard the crunch of snow as he shifted his weight, and then I heard the footsteps, turning away. He walked away, just like he did on Christmas Eve, all those years ago. He had come to the door, he had knocked, and when I didn't answer, he had turned, and he had walked away. I watched his dark shape retreat, a man swallowed by the snow and his own weakness. He chose easy, even now. I turned, unlocked my door, and stepped inside, into the light. I didn't lock the door. I had pulled it shut. But it was an old, warped piece of timber. It always left a gap. I stood in the center of my hidden command center, the blue-white light of the monitors painting my face, and I listened to the sound of my father's failure fade into the snow. The silence he left behind was his answer. Lantern 1 was active. The external microphones were so sensitive, I could hear the wind scouring the bark of the trees 50 feet away. And I heard him. He had stopped. He was turning back. "Nora?" he called. His voice was thin, ripped apart by the wind. He sounded pathetic. "Nora, I'm sorry." I did not move. I did not breathe. I just watched the audio waveforms spike on the monitor. He was a man apologizing to a locked door. "I am sorry," he said again, louder, desperate. "But you know Sable. You know she's fragile. She isn't strong like you are. She wouldn't understand. She needs this. She needs this to be perfect. She needs this. You are strong. You can handle it." The same old rotten song, the excuse that had cost me my childhood. I leaned in, just an inch, toward the internal microphone on my desk, the one that was recording my half of the archive. My voice was a whisper, a volume intended only for the recording, for the permanent record. Everyone is fragile when they're always given soft pillows. I heard new footsteps, fast and sharp, crunching through the snow with violent energy. Marla. "Gareth, get inside. What are you doing?" she hissed. The microphone picked up the sibilant, venomous sound perfectly. My father stammered. "I'm talking to her." "You are not," Marla spat. Don't you dare beg her. She wants this. She's enjoying this. Get inside, now. Let her freeze." The sound of an arm being grabbed, a muffled protest. The footsteps retreated. One pair angry, one pair shuffling and defeated. The front door of the main house slammed shut, a muffled thud that vibrated through the snow. I was alone. I was not freezing. The shed was heavily insulated, the small electric heater humming steadily. I was in my courtroom, and the defendants had just fled. It was time to file the charges. I turned to the heavy, fireproof metal container in the corner. I unlocked it. Inside, my real work was meticulously organized. I pulled out a tab labeled Proof, year by year. The click of the metal ring binder was dry and sharp in the small space. This was not a collection of feelings. This was a ledger of facts. Page 1. My valedictorian certificate, side by side with the email from the trust administrator, dated 3 days later, stating that the educational fund was under review and my scholarship request was denied. Page 2. The catering invoice for Sable's Sweet 16, paid for by Pinecrest Socials, for an amount that was, to the dollar, the exact amount of the college support I had been denied. Page 3. The printout from my father's email. I had his password for years, where he promised me he just couldn't afford to send me on the leadership program, juxtaposed with the bank transfer from the trust to Pinecrest for a community development grant that was, in reality, the down payment on Sable's first convertible. It was all there, a decade of my achievements being taxed to pay for Sable's failures, a decade of my grandmother's legacy being siphoned, laundered, and embezzled. I closed the binder. I took 2 encrypted, waterproof USB drives from the container. The first one, I slid into my coat pocket. I walked to the shed door, opened it, and stepped back into the storm for a moment. The main house was dark. A sleeping giant. No, not sleeping. Hiding. I walked to the decorative, wrought iron garden mailbox near the property line. It was an aesthetic choice by Marla. Never used for actual mail. It was a perfect dead drop. I opened the slot and dropped the USB inside. It landed with a tiny, tinny clink. The first backup was in place. I went back inside the shed. The second USB. I looked up. A small, high-sensitivity camera, disguised as a smoke detector, watched the room. I stood on my chair and placed the second drive on a high, dusty shelf, behind an old paint can, but perfectly visible to the camera's line of sight. Anyone reviewing this footage, my footage, would know exactly where the archive was. I sat back down at my console, as if the world itself was protesting. A violent gust of wind hit the shed. The entire structure shuddered. The overhead light flickered, buzzed, and went out. The shed was plunged into absolute, pitch-black darkness. The hum of the heater died. The glow of the monitors vanished. Silence. I didn't move. I didn't even flinch. I counted to 5. Then, I reached down and flipped the main switch on the battery backup. A low hum started. The deep-cycle marine batteries I had installed under the floorboards kicked in. The monitors flashed, one by one, back to life. The system rebooted, the internal lights, a separate low-wattage LED strip, glow a cold, steady light. I was off the grid. I was off their grid. The light, sharp and digital, cut the darkness. It was the light of the truth. It was a blade. It was time. I opened my secured email client. The draft was waiting. It was addressed to Mr. Keene, the passive, complicit administrator of the Olive Lantern Trust. The subject line was clear. Formal audit request. Per Section 7.3. Olive Lantern Trust. The body was short. Mr. Keene. Pursuant to the governing charter of the Olive Lantern Trust, and specifically the criteria outlined in Addendum A determining the primary beneficiary. I am writing to identify myself as said beneficiary. I am formally invoking my right under Section 7, Subpoint 3, to demand an immediate, full, and external audit of all trust activities, disbursements, and associated consultant agreements, retroactive to the date of inception. I am also requesting an immediate emergency freeze on all trust assets and accounts. Pending the outcome of this audit, attached, you will find a preliminary file of findings to support the claim of systematic misappropriation. I require an immediate, in-person meeting with all named parties. Nora Whitford. My finger hovered over the send button. This was the moment, the click that would change everything, the click that would turn my quiet, invisible pain into a public, unavoidable fact. I thought of my father's back as he walked away. I thought of Marla's hiss, "Don't beg her." I thought of the empty chairs, the cut-up photographs, the lifetime of being told I was strong so that I could be nothing. I pressed the button. The email was gone. The shed was silent again, save for the hum of the batteries. I sat there, watching the screen. My heart was not racing. It was slow, steady. I waited. 1 minute, 2, ping, a new email in my inbox. It was an automated response. Subject: Formal audit request. Your request has been received, verified, and escalated. Per the emergency protocols of the Trust Charter, a mandatory legal meeting of all signatories, consultants, and named beneficiaries has been scheduled. Time: 10:00 a.m. Date: December 25th. Location: North Hollow Hall, Conference Room B. Attendance is mandatory. Failure to appear will constitute a forfeiture of position. We wish you a pleasant holiday. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. 10 o'clock, Christmas morning. Marla's perfect family holiday was just canceled. Mine, however, had a brand new schedule. Christmas morning was not a celebration. It was a court summons. There were no carols, no stockings, no smell of cinnamon. There was only the sound of my tires on the wet, gray slush of the roads, the squeak of my windshield wipers pushing melted snow aside. The blizzard had broken, leaving behind a world that was painfully, antiseptically bright. The sun was a searchlight, reflecting off every icy surface, demanding that every hidden thing be seen. It was a legal sunrise. We arrived at North Hollow Hall at precisely 9:55 in the morning. It was the town's municipal building, a joyless, gray brick structure where you went to fight a property tax assessment or attend a zoning board meeting. It was sterile, impartial, and smelled faintly of floor wax and old paper. It was the perfect place to dismantle a family. I was not alone. My team, my lantern group, was with me. Rowan walked beside me, his face set in a look of quiet, solid support. My great-aunts, Elspeth and Maeve, were already waiting inside, sitting on a hard wooden bench. They looked as if they were attending church, righteous and formidable, their spines straight. And leading us, holding a slim leather briefcase, was Maya Lark. She was my lawyer. She was 29, just like me, but she moved with the focused, vibrating energy of a hummingbird. She was the youngest partner at a firm in the city, a specialist in complex familial trust and estate litigation. She had been delighted by my file. We walked into Conference Room B. The fluorescent lights hummed, casting a flat, cold light on the cheap, laminate table. They were already there. My family. They were a wreckage. They had not slept. They were still, grotesquely, wearing the rumpled, expensive clothes from last night's ruined party. It was as if they had been sitting in the dark, waiting for the execution, and had been dragged here without being allowed to change. Gareth, my father, was a shade of gray I had never seen before. His eyes were bloodshot, his skin puffy. He stared at the scratched surface of the table, his hands trembling. Marla was rigid. She had applied fresh, thick makeup, but it was a death mask. Her lipstick was a violent red slash in her pale, tight face. She sat bolt upright, clutching a leather portfolio to her chest like a shield. And Sable, my God. Sable. She was a ghost in red velvet. Her dress was creased, her hair matted on one side. Her mascara had run, leaving black, smeared tracks down her cheeks. She was huddled in her chair, shivering, her eyes wide and vacant. The star of the family had not just been extinguished, she had imploded. At the head of the table sat Mr. Keene, the trust administrator. He was a bland, beige man, a man whose entire career was built on not looking too closely at things he was paid to manage. He was sweating. Despite the chill in the room, he was furious to be here on Christmas Day. "This is," he began, his voice raspy, "profoundly irregular, Ms. Whitford." "It is," Maya Lark said, her voice cutting, crisp, and clean. She sat down, opened her laptop, and plugged it into the large monitor on the wall. "But it is also, per the trust charter, perfectly legal. We are here to execute Section 7, Subpoint 3. "The beneficiary is not determined," Marla snapped, her voice like cracking ice. "The beneficiary is determined by the criteria in Addendum A," Maya corrected, not looking up, "which you, as a consultant, should know." She looked at Mr. Keene. "Please read the criteria for the primary beneficiary. Mr. Keene, for the record." Mr. Keene fumbled with his binder, his papers rattling. He put on his glasses. He read, his voice a monotone of misery. "The beneficiary shall be the Whitford grandchild who has been, quote, systematically excluded from equitable benefit, and whose personal achievements have been demonstrably overlooked in favor of other familial priorities." "Thank you," Maya said. The monitor on the wall flickered to life. It was not a video. It was not a photograph. It was a spreadsheet. My spreadsheet. It was a flowchart, a ledger of my erasure. Column A, Nora Whitford, Achievement Milestone. Column B, Trust Fund Activity, Denial. Column C, Sable Whitford, Event Law Request. Column D, Pinecrest Socials, Disbursement. "Let's begin," Maya said. On May 10th, 2009, Nora Whitford is named high school valedictorian. Her request for the Eloise Whitford Academic Grant, a standing $5,000 award, is denied. The reason, according to your signature, Mr. Keene, is insufficient liquid funds. She clicked. The same day, $5,000 is transferred from the Olive Lantern Trust to Pinecrest Socials for community event planning, which is then routed to Sable Whitford, Sweet 16 Party Catering. Sable let out a small, strangled sob. I didn't know." On September 14th, 2011, Maya continued, her voice a relentless, steady blade. "Nora Whitford requests a $4,000 supplement for a study abroad program. Denied. Market volatility. The following week, $4,000 is paid by Pinecrest Socials to a Lexus dealership in the city. As a promotional expense, it matches the down payment on Sable Whitford's first convertible." "This is slander," Marla shrieked, half rising from her chair. "This is private family business. I demand you close this meeting. I demand you get the press out of here." Mr. Keene looked at her, his face a mask of pale terror. "Mrs. Whitford, there is no press. There are only the minutes. This is a binding legal meeting." "I thought it was a family fund," Sable suddenly wailed, her voice cracking. "I thought it was just money. You said it was for us. You said it was for the family. You didn't say it was hers." "Be quiet, Sable," Marla hissed. "No," I said. It was the first word I had spoken. The room went absolutely still. "You be quiet, Marla. You've been speaking for 20 years. You're done." Maya continued, her finger tapping the trackpad. "And finally, the most egregious instance, June 4th, 2012, Nora Whitford, 18 years old, is granted a full scholarship to her university. The trust is required to provide a matching stipend for living expenses. Instead, She clicked. A new document filled the screen, a PDF. It was a funding reallocation form. My father, Gareth, made a noise, a wet, choking sound, as if he had been punched. He was staring at the bottom of the screen, at the signature line, Gareth Whitford. It was his signature, authorizing the cancellation of the scholarship stipend and the reallocation of the designated funds to Pinecrest Socials. He had not just allowed my theft. He had signed the paper. He had driven the getaway car. His whole body was shaking, a violent, rattling tremor. His eyes were fixed on his own name, on the black and white proof of his betrayal. The file, Maya said, contains 47 separate, documented instances of misappropriation, totaling, with interest, $782,450. The number landed in the room like a bomb. Marla's jaw was slack. Sable was openly weeping, thick, ugly sobs. Gareth just stared, his face completely, utterly broken. "What?" Mr. Keene whispered, his voice a dry rasp. What do you want?" Maya looked at me. It was my turn. I stood up. I looked at each of them. First, a full, external audit, to be paid for by Mr. Keene's firm, not the trust. Keene nodded, his head bobbing. Second, an immediate and total freeze of all related accounts. Pinecrest Socials is to be dissolved, and a full 100% repayment of the $782,000 is to be made to the trust principal, with penalties. "We don't have that," Marla gasped. "That," I said, "is a logistics problem. You're good at those." Third, I continued, Mr. Keene is removed as administrator. Marla Whitford is permanently removed as a consultant. I am, as the sole, proven beneficiary, assuming temporary custodial control of the trust, effective immediately. And fourth, a public apology, not to the newspaper, to the family, you will explain, to the aunts and uncles you lied to, exactly where the family fund came from. You will tell them you stole my inheritance to fund your daughter's parties. The room was silent. Gareth had his head in his hands. Mr. Keene looked at the documents. He looked at Maya. He knew he was ruined. He had one path to avoid a criminal investigation: total, abject surrender. "In light of the evidence," Mr. Keene said, his voice trembling, "and per the emergency powers of the Charter, I accept the motion for a special audit. All related accounts are frozen, effective immediately. All of Ms. Whitford's demands are provisionally accepted, pending the audit." It was finished. The word "immediately" echoed in the silent, stuffy room, the tension, the poison, the weight of 20 years, just evaporated. I felt my shoulders, which I hadn't realized were tensed, finally drop. I looked out the window. The sun was fully up now, a clear, white light. The sharp, blinding glare of the legal sunrise had passed. Outside, on the bare branches of the oak tree by the parking lot, the ice that had encased them was melting. A single drop of water ran down the window pane, then another. The snow was turning to water. It was washing away. We left them in that cold, gray room. We walked out. Maya, my aunts, Rowan, and I. We didn't look back. We stepped out of North Hollow Hall, and the watery afternoon sun of Christmas Day felt like the first real light I had seen in years. The air was soft, the ice melting, the sound of dripping water coming from every roof and every branch. It was the sound of a great, frozen tension finally breaking. We drove out of the main town, away from the grand, empty houses and the municipal buildings, and up into the hills where the real, older part of Winterford Ridge lived, the part that wasn't about Marla's social climbing or my father's inherited name. We arrived at the Lantern Chapel late in the afternoon, on December 25th. It wasn't a grand cathedral. It was a small, beautiful structure of dark, reclaimed timber, built 100 years ago by the town's founding families as a place for everyone. It was maintained not by a single wealthy donor, but by a community fund. It was the place my grandmother Eloise had loved. It was the place I had chosen. As I stepped out of the car, I could smell it. The sharp, clean scent of pine resin from the surrounding forest, and the homey, sweet smell of wood smoke from the chapel's own chimney. There were no spotlights, no valet parking, just a simple, shoveled path lit by a dozen paper lanterns, their light a warm, golden, flickering glow against the snow. I walked inside. The pews were full, not with hundreds, but with the 43 people who had mattered. My great-aunts Elspeth and Maeve were in the front row. Rowan was there, standing beside my soon-to-be husband, his best man and my witness. My colleagues from Ravenline, the ones who had worked late nights with me on logistics problems, the ones who saw me as Nora the manager, not Nora the afterthought, were there. My old high school art teacher, the one who had encouraged me to apply for scholarships, the elderly couple from down the street, the ones who used to give me cookies when I was a child, the ones who had known my mother. The chairs were full of the people who had chosen to be there, the people who, when given a choice between a lie and the truth, had quietly, without fuss, booked a plane ticket. They had shown up. And as I stood at the back, taking a breath, I saw her, Sable. She was standing in the open doorway, a dark silhouette against the bright, snowy landscape. She was still wearing that ridiculous, rumpled red velvet dress from last night. Her hair was a mess. Her face was pale and stained with tears. She looked small, a girl, not a star, not an heiress, just a lost, cold girl. She stood there, clutching her elbows, and her eyes met mine across the room. I saw in her face a universe of confusion, the entire world she had been raised to believe in, the world where she was the center, where everything was funded, where love was a transaction she always won, had been vaporized in a sterile conference room. She looked at me. She looked at the warm, full chapel. She looked at the smiling faces turning to greet me. And she saw a world she had never known existed, a world where love was not bought, but earned, where presence was a choice. She hesitated. I saw her legs tremble, as if she might turn and run, back to the cold, empty mansion, back to the lie. But she didn't. She took one, faltering step inside. She looked for a seat. There were none. The pews were full, so she slid, quietly, onto the last step of the choir loft at the very back, tucking her knees up, pulling her ruined dress around her. She found a space on the floor, in the shadows, out of the spotlight. She was just present. She was just there. I turned my attention away from her. I walked down the aisle. A simple string duo, a cello and a violin, was playing a soft, familiar melody. It wasn't a grand march. It was an old folk tune that everyone in Winterford Ridge knew. A song about the turning of the seasons. The chapel was lit not by chandeliers, but by dozens of lanterns hanging from the wooden beams, casting a warm, buttery, golden light. It was the light of a hearth, not a stage. I looked at the front pews. There, set apart from the seated guests, were 5 empty chairs. They were the empty chairs from my childhood, the ones that had always marked my absence. The number was deliberate. 5 chairs for the 5 central figures I had been cut out to accommodate, but they were not empty accusations. They were not stark and cold. On each one, I had placed a single, beautiful bough of long-needled pine, tied with a simple, elegant, olive-green ribbon. They were not chairs for ghosts. They were a memorial, a quiet acknowledgement of the past, a way of saying, I remember, and it is finished. They were no longer invisible. They were decorated, seen, and set aside. I reached the front. I took my husband's hands. We said our vows. They were not poetic speeches about soulmates and destiny. They were promises, simple, strong, like planks of wood, promises to be present, promises to be honest, promises to show up every day, especially when it was hard, and when it was my turn. I looked out, not just at him, but at Rowan, at my aunts, at my old teacher, at the faces lit by the warm, golden light. "I dedicate this day and my life," I said, my voice clear and steady in the small, warm chapel. "Not to the idea of a perfect family, not to the people who should have been here, but to you, to the ones who are, for those who showed up." We exchanged rings. The kiss was simple and real and warm. The minister smiled. "I present to you," and as he spoke, the sound of the old chapel bell began to ring, not a frantic, celebratory peal, but a single, deep, resonant clang, a sound of finality, a sound of truth, clang. It was a seal, pressed into the soft wax of the moment, clang. It was a full stop, the end of the old story, clang, the beginning of the new one. As we walked back down the aisle, the string duo playing their simple tune, the guests were not throwing rice or confetti, they were just smiling. Real smiles, at the door. We had a table. No tower of champagne. No grand wedding cake. Instead, there were small, 4-ounce bottles of dark, golden green olive oil, a gift for each guest. The labels were simple, cream-colored, with the same olive branch from my grandmother's trust. The label read, "For showing up." We stepped outside. The sun had set. The air was cold, but the wind was gone. The world was still, and the sky was a deep, impossible, cloudless purple. The scent of pine was sharp in the night air. I stood on the chapel steps, surrounded by the only family I had ever truly had, and I breathed. We were standing on the steps of the Lantern Chapel, the cold, clean air filling our lungs. The small reception was meant to start in the parish hall, a simple meal of soup and bread waiting for our guests, but just as we were about to go inside, a car pulled up the snowy drive. The door opened, and Mr. Keene got out. He was alone. He looked awful. A man who had been through a shredder. He was holding a long, blue, official-looking envelope, the kind meant for wills. "Mr. Keene," I said. It was a statement, not a question. "Ms. Whitford," he said, his voice a dry rasp. He looked at the chapel, at the small, warm crowd, at the paper lanterns, and his face was a mask of confusion. He was a man of cold, sterile offices, and this place did not compute. "When the emergency clause was triggered by your email this morning, it required the immediate opening of the primary bank safe deposit box, not just the administrator's files. The charter was very specific." He stepped forward, his feet crunching. "I found this. It was in a separate, sealed envelope, attached to the original will, marked, 'To be opened only upon the execution of Section 7, Subpoint 3. It's a final codicil, from Eloise Whitford.'" Maya stepped forward, her eyes sharp. She took the envelope. We watched as she broke the wax seal and read the single page inside. Her eyes went wide. She looked up at me, a slow, impressed smile dawning. "Well," she said, "your grandmother was a hell of a planner." "What is it?" Rowan asked. Maya read it aloud, her voice ringing in the quiet afternoon. "This addendum supersedes all previous beneficiary designations. The final and true beneficiary of the Olive Lantern Trust is not to be the one who merely claims to be forgotten, but the one who proves their presence, the one who demonstrates their worth not by inherited words, but by deliberate action, by seeking truth through logistics, by building a community to protect the legacy, by demanding an audit, not of emotion, but of fact." My grandmother's words, truth through logistics. Mr. Keene nodded, his face pale and clammy. "Your Project Lantern, Ms. Whitford, the network of witnesses you gathered, the systematic, data-driven audit, the plan to protect the community. It wasn't just a claim, it was the key. You fulfilled the final, hidden criteria. You proved you were the beneficiary by documenting your own erasure." The air was still. "Therefore," Keene continued, as if reciting his own eulogy, "the Emergency Board has issued a binding ruling, full temporary custodial control of the Olive Lantern Trust, during its complete reorganization, is transferred to you, Nora Whitford. Effective immediately, he looked past me, his voice hardening. Marla Whitford is permanently, and with prejudice, barred from any and all positions, consultant or otherwise, related to the trust or its holdings. A voice, choked and thick, came from the back. She deserves it. We all turned. My father, Gareth, was standing near the chapel door. He had been there, with Sable, watching from the shadows, like ghosts at the feast. He stepped forward into the lantern light. His face was a ruin, but for the first time in my life, his eyes were completely clear. He was not looking at the floor. He was looking at me. "I have something to say," he said, his voice trembling. He looked at the small crowd. "My family. Last night, I followed Nora to the garden. I went to the shed. I knocked on the door." He stopped, his voice breaking, and he had to take a breath. "She didn't answer me, and I turned around. I walked away. I left her out there, in the cold, just like I have left her out in the cold her entire life." He was weeping now, openly, but he didn't wipe his face. "It's what I always do. I choose what is easy. I choose the path of least resistance. And that path, it was always Sable. It was always Marla. And it was always a lie. I am so sorry. Nora, I failed you. I failed my mother. I failed." He didn't ask for forgiveness. He just stated the facts. It was the most honest, brutal admission I had ever heard from him. I didn't know what to say, so I acted. I walked back into the chapel, to one of the 5 empty chairs I had set at the front. I picked up the bough of pine, with its olive green ribbon. I walked back out, into the parish hall, to the long, simple table set for dinner. I placed the chair at the head of the table. I untied the ribbon and retied it, securely, to the back of the chair. I turned to the room. "This," I said, my voice steady, "is for the times I was cut from the frame, for every time I was the empty seat, the shadow in the glass. From now on, this chair is here as a reminder. We don't cut anyone out. We don't leave anyone behind. We always make space." I have something." It was Sable. She was moving forward, a creeping, hesitant motion. Her ruined red dress was a bizarre splash of color in this quiet, warm room. She was holding a plain white business envelope, crumpled in her fist. She wouldn't look at me. She just held it out. "I'm sorry," she whispered. The whisper was the most shocking thing of all. It wasn't a performance. It wasn't a wail for a spotlight. It was a tiny, broken, genuine sound, meant only for me. I didn't know. I mean, I knew, but I didn't know. I didn't want to know. It was just easy, like Dad said. I took the envelope. It was thick. "I went to the bank this morning," she whispered, her eyes fixed on the floorboards. "After the meeting, I cashed out my bonds, the ones Grammy Eloise left me. I sold the ring, the big one, and the car. It's not all of it. It's not even close. I think it's only about $30,000, but it's a start, to pay it back. The receipts are in there. I'm so sorry. Nora." She wasn't lying. She wasn't acting. There was no stage. There was just a girl, in a ruined dress, with an envelope, trying, in her own clumsy, limited way, to atone. "This is ridiculous. This is theatrics." Marla. She had appeared in the doorway, her face a mask of pure, undiluted fury. "Sable, stop this. Stop this groveling. And you," she pointed a shaking, manicured finger at me. "This is what you wanted, isn't it? To take everything, to humiliate us, to ruin my daughter." She was about to launch into a full-scale attack, but Mr. Keene stepped forward, his face like stone. He was a man who had been humiliated, and he was done. "Mrs. Whitford, I would strongly suggest you stop talking. Your position as a consultant is terminated. Furthermore, as of 15 minutes ago, by court order, The bank has officially closed all accounts related to the Pinecrest Socials Shell Corporation. All remaining assets are frozen. You can't, she shrieked. It is done, Keene said, a flicker of cold satisfaction in his dead eyes. And the funds, the $250,000 you had transferred for your daughter's fully funded wedding, that money is not being returned to the Olive Lantern Trust. Marla's face went blank. What? It was, as you so clearly labeled it, a community grant, Keene said, savoring the words. Therefore, as the new custodial administrator, Ms. Whitford has redirected it. It is being transferred, in full, to the Winterford Ridge Community Fund, for the actual community, to fix the roof on this chapel, to fund the town library, to replace the high school's band equipment. It is, as you said, for the people. Marla's mouth opened. A small, strange sound came out. She had been beaten, not by emotion, not by screaming, but by her own fraudulent paperwork, by logistics. The room was quiet. Marla was a statue of silent, impotent rage. Sable was crying softly. Gareth was just watching. I picked up my glass of water from the table. I'd like to make a toast, I said. The small crowd, my real family, raised their glasses. I looked at Sable. I looked at my father. This isn't a victory. This is a recalibration of what we value, a recalibration of love. It's not about who is the loudest. It's about who shows up. To us. To us, Rowan echoed, and everyone drank. One last thing, Rowan said, grinning. He pointed to a small digital screen on the wall, one the chapel used for announcements. An image flickered to life. It was a new photo. He had taken it just before the ceremony. It was me, my husband, Rowan, my great-aunts, my old teacher, my colleagues, all of us, crammed together, laughing, squinting, completely, wonderfully in the frame. He had set the timer. No one was the photographer. Everyone was present. I looked at the wall in the parish hall, where an old faded photo of my father's perfect family had hung for years, the one I had been cut out of. Rowan walked over, took the old frame down, and put his new one in its place. The knot was untied. The chapel door was open. The party, small and warm, was starting. The smell of soup and fresh bread filled the air. I looked outside. The snow had stopped falling. The world was still. I looked out the door, across the hills, toward the main house. I could just see the dark line of the trees, the place where my shed, my fortress, my witness box, stood silent. My father had walked over. He was standing next to me, not touching, just standing. He was looking out at the trees, too. Next time you knock, I said, my voice quiet, just for him. Stay. Don't walk away. Just stay. He looked at me, his eyes red. He nodded. Once, a solid, real gesture. I will. Good, I said. Because dinner is ready. He stayed. He didn't walk away. And for the first time in my life, my entire family, the real and the broken, all of us, sat down at one table. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Let me know where you are listening from in the comments. I love to see how far these stories travel and to read your thoughts. Please, if you enjoyed this, subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and give us an extra boost by hitting that hype button so more people can hear this story.